Welcome everybody to this afternoon's session. We're going to talk about how to use a very interesting product called iceni InFix to prepare PDF files for various tasks that are involved with my translation work and probably with the work of a lot of the rest of you. The reason that I'm talking about this specific product as opposed to doing a more general presentation on PDF preparation, which I do on other occasions, is that this particular tool has some very unique features that I have not seen, certainly have not seen in such an accessible manner with most of the other professional PDF editing tools that I've worked with over the years. And it also has a lot of those interesting features accessible to people whether or not they have a license. And they've got a very interesting licensing model, which maybe we can talk about at the end. In fact, I think somebody from the firm iceni is participating in today's workshop, so he may be able to answer some of your questions that I'm not knowledgeable about. But anyway, we're going to go through and talk about some of the possibilities that I have made use of in, I think, about 8 or 9 years, maybe longer, using this product. It's been around for a while and it's continued to improve during that time. And I think it is one of the most generally useful tools for coping with PDF that I've got. Let's see. Okay, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Kevin Lossner. I have a blog called Translation Tribulations. The URL is at the bottom of the right side of this slide. I'm a German to English translator most of the time. I'm also a technology consultant. I've been involved with computer technology, programming, IT consulting, and all that sort of a thing for a lot of years now, more than I really care to admit, actually. And I'm also involved with a lot of scientific translation, intellectual property, contract law, and related scientific and legal disciplines. But I try to spend as much time as I can with my dogs because that's really my passion. And so I think that it's good to use technologies like iceni InFix, or on the cat tool side, in my case, MemoQ, because the right tools used the right way can free up more time for all of us for the things that are really more important. And today I'm going to talk about several different areas. We're going to start off talking about using iceni InFix to get access to the source text that you'll be translating and some of the considerations that are relevant there. What kind of PDF are you dealing with? What type of file does your client expect you to give them after the translation? That's very important, and that's also something that people are not always considering when they're making use of some of the latest technologies that have become available. Also, I want to talk and how to get the text out in various forms to work on. And I also want to share a couple of ideas about dealing with graphics, because that's an area where I've found iceni InFix to be particularly useful. And after that, I want to talk a little bit about the use of InFix, or PDFs in general, as references, and different ways that you can manage different kinds of PDF to make better use of them as references in your translation work. That's an aspect that doesn't get considered very often, but I've found that since I've begun using some of these techniques, I have been able to make better use of the reference information that clients have provided to me or that I've found in other sources. And so I just want to share some of those ideas with all of you in case that can be a benefit to you as well. And in the third section of this talk, I want to talk about some of what I consider to be unique aspects of iceni InFix. Of course, you can do similar things with Adobe Acrobat, the fully licensed editing version, but I generally find that the features and the interface in InFix is more accessible. I just like working with it better on the whole. And Then at the end, there's a few other aspects that I want to share, which I'll surprise you with, and then we'll go into a question and answer session, or just a discussion. If you have any issues that aren't clear, or you have other things involving PDF that you'd like to find out if iceni or some other methods can help you with. One of the most important things to consider when you're going to be working with a PDF to be translated is, what kind of PDF are you dealing with? Now, that may seem obvious to most of you who work with PDFs, but I'm always surprised when I follow some of the discussions among translators or wannabe translators in social media, where somebody will make a blanket recommendation for a tool that they like, solid converter, or there's hundreds of tools out there that you can use to work with various kinds of PDF. And not all of them are really very good at covering the whole range of PDF challenges that you might get involved with. Some of them are particularly good with OCR perhaps, but they don't necessarily deal with extractable text in such a way as to take it out of the PDF file and make it available to you without introducing errors possibly. Other ones deal extraordinarily well with PDFs that were created from Microsoft Word or InDesign or some other computer program and have accessible text, but they don't do anything at all with PDFs that have scanned content. And when people discuss these things, they don't always differentiate very well what kind of PDF they're talking about. When we're talking about iceni InFix, the good news is that it sort of covers the whole range. There might be individual tools that cover some particular aspect better, but I think of InFix as being a fairly high quality Swiss Army knife for dealing with PDF files. And so we're going to go through a little bit later and look at different types of PDFs and the approaches that we can take to get access to that text. And then, like I mentioned before, it's very important to consider, what kind of file does your client expect you to give them at the end of your project? Most of the time in my work, it's not a PDF. For other people, that may be different. There are some translators I know who do an awful lot of work on very graphics heavy flyers. iceni InFix absolutely excels at that. And in the case of those translators, yes, the final format that their client wants is very often PDF. And then you definitely got the right tool for that. But you have to consider that, and then consider how to design your process so that you can do your work in the best way possible, with the fewest possibilities of introducing errors, and then still produce a file at the end that gives the client what they expect. And then, as I say, we're going to talk about some of the special aspects of dealing with graphics and how InFix is very useful for that. Okay, let's start off with what I consider to be the worst case in dealing with PDFs: scanned content. Some people affectionately refer to that as dead PDF. And this is the kind of content where you have to use fairly good quality OCR. My usual OCR tool that I use for most of this work is ABBYY FineReader. However, the integrated OCR that you find in iceni InFix is also fairly good. I have not had an opportunity to do one-to-one comparisons of the error rate between iceni versus ABBYY FineReader or OmniPage or so. But in the limited tests that I've done, I've been fairly impressed on the whole. And when the results have not been good, that is usually because the results of the input file, I mean, the input files themselves were not very good. The scans were low resolution, or there was a lot of junk. The ugly graphic that you see here on the right is a scanned copy of a patent that was granted back in 1915, I think, and actually the quality of the scan is so bad that I can barely even read the date. It's for the Haber process for ammonia, which some of you may know if you had chemistry a long time ago. And I'm not going to show the results of that because that was a pretty miserable conversion. But you know, when you deal with things like that, no OCR is going to help you, and the results are going to be very hit and miss. But for a lot of the documents that I see, the scans are fairly high quality, and the conversion that I get from iceni InFix is quite high quality. You'll see an example of that shortly. Okay, to access the OCR functions in InFix, you simply open up the document that you have with scanned content, or if you've got iceni InFix running with no document, with no PDFs open, you can also import graphics files like JPEGs or TIFF files and create a PDF document into which they are inserted. And then under the document menu down toward the bottom, you've got a simple command to invoke to start the optical character recognition and turn that scanned image of text into real editable text that you can get access to for translation purposes. And over on the right-hand side, you see the dialog. You can set which language it's for. iceni InFix OCR supports quite a number of languages. I think it's something like 15. You can see the list on iceni's site. And one thing that's interesting to note, in that little dialog on the right, it says PDF style searchable image. I have another term for that, an older term. It's called text on image PDF. And that's a very useful kind of PDF, especially for reference purposes. We'll talk about that a little bit later. That's where it maintains the original graphic image from the scan, but hidden behind that image is searchable text. So if you search for particular terms and the OCR has been accurate, you'll actually see those terms highlighted on the text. And so using this function here in iceni, for example, you could take a reference file that a client has given you, perform OCR, and then search rather quickly to find particular text passages that may be relevant to your translation. This was a technique that I came on some years ago when I had to do a report on translation processes for the European Parliament. There were some difficulties, and there was a guideline document that was a little bit over 50 pages long that was scanned very badly. And when I was writing my report, I had to make frequent references to different parts of that guideline document from the European Parliament. And it was driving me crazy to flip through the PDF and try to find a particular passage that I wanted to cite and give the page reference and so forth. And then it occurred to me, wait a minute, I've got an OCR program. Most OCR programs will create searchable image PDFs or text on image PDFs. And so in a few minutes, I managed to convert my dead PDF with a scan of the 50 plus pages into something that I could search very quickly. And the interesting thing with iceni is it does that almost automatically, but it also does something that I haven't seen in other ones. Once you have done that conversion to make your searchable reference PDF, you can still go through and select areas that you want and export a clean text for translation. That's really nice. It's kind of a, well, as I say, iceni is sort of an all-purpose toolkit for doing this kind of work. It's really a nice program. Okay, yeah, how good are the results when you do the iceni OCR? Oh, yeah, this dialog over on the right-hand side appears automatically if you open up a PDF in iceni InFix and you just click somewhere on the image. The program assumes that you want to do some kind of editing or whatever, and all of a sudden this dialog shows up, without actually requesting it, and offers to OCR the document. So if you can't remember where the OCR function is in the applications menus, don't worry about it. The function will find you. And let's have a look at some of the results. This is this is a view of the OCR editor, which shows you the converted text on top of a grayed out image of the original scanned PDF in the background. And I did this with a fairly low quality image done from a brochure from one of my clients. I made a dead PDF out of it. And you can see a couple of errors in this. For example, in the first line of text, it says the martyr, and the word next is supposed to be tank. That's a type of German military tank. And it converted it as tonk because it was, say, a low resolution thing. But most of the words look pretty good. The name of the author of the article has a / instead of an L. But what I think is kind of interesting here, if you look at the text in the column down at the bottom left, in the original PDF, there's a large drop cap F with the word fire, and in the OCR, it interpreted that correctly. So there is some sophistication to the OCR engine that is used in iceni InFix. And on the whole, given the bad quality of the input, the deliberate bad quality of the input that I used here, I think the results are pretty good, and they would probably be more than satisfactory for most of the cases that I've seen when I have to do routine OCR in my legal work, for example. But if you do have a bad scan, don't be surprised if the conversion isn't all that pretty. It's with any OCR program, if you feed it garbage, you're probably going to get garbage back out. Okay, so now that you have this PDF that you've either created some extractable text in by using the OCR process in iceni InFix, or if the PDF that was provided to you in the first place already has extractable text, what do you do to get it out so that you can start translating? Get to the real work here. Well, there's 3 different possibilities in iceni InFix, each of which has advantages and disadvantages. And I've listed these 3 options, and there may be more than that I don't know about, but these are the 3 options I use all the time. And I've listed them more or less in my personal order of preference. The order in which they might be relevant to your types of projects is a personal thing, and you know that better than I ever will. But for my work and my personal preferences to how to work with the documents, I prefer first to use the so-called article export function to create either a plain text file or very often an RTF file. That function requires a license to get good results out of it. If you have an unlicensed copy of iceni InFix, you can access that menu function and you can export a file just to see how the process works. But that file that you export will have random character substitutions, so it will actually be garbage and unusable for translation purposes or to share with somebody who might want to read the text of an article that was in the PDF that you had. This is simply to show you how the function works. So if you want to selectively export different parts of a PDF document for translation and use this article export feature, you do need to get a license. And it's not very expensive, and I think it's quite worthwhile. This is an extremely useful function for me. The second way of getting the text out of the PDF file and into a format where you can translate it effectively is to use the local XML export feature. And some people who are familiar with the third option may wonder why I prefer that. I was told some time ago that the XLIFF export is actually more accurate. I'd never done a one-on-one comparison to see if that's really true, but the somewhat neglected XML export that nobody seems to talk about much actually has some features that may be particularly important to certain colleagues, depending again on the nature of your work and the contractual conditions for your work. And also the XML export can do some things that none of the others can. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Over on the right-hand side of this slide, you can see a picture of one of my clients' flyers with some little blue zones marked out. These are areas of the text that have been selected for export in a so-called article. And by going through the PDF and selecting the zones that I want to export, I am also leaving out the parts that I don't want to see, because a lot of the OCR processes, unless you are going and manually defining the zones that you want to do the OCR on, which I do all the time in ABBYY FineReader, they're not selective, and so you get a lot of extra junk that you might not necessarily want, that is not relevant to your translation, and that may also confuse things. And also, when you're working on certain magazine articles, for example, and there's call-out boxes with additional information and so forth, it's nice to be able to control the order in which the text on the page is exported, and to find some logical place for these call-out boxes to be inserted that are not going to disrupt the flow of the text that you're translating. So anyway, it's a nice feature. I totally recommend it. And these are some of the options that are available. RTF, plain text, HTML, various kinds. I usually use the RTF or the plain text. And that function is just easily accessible under the export menu. You can also export pages, okay, where you haven't gone through and selected different parts of the pages and defined these as articles. And very often that will work fine, but it depends on the layout of your PDF. If these are simple pages with the text all in one big block, well, then the export pages function may be all you need, and you have the same format options, RTF, plain text, and HTML, and EPUB, but I don't know anybody who translates EPUB. But the problem is when you've got a more complex layout, or even a layout that doesn't look complex but becomes complicated when you use these export functions, like a two-column PDF dictionary. Yeah, I get a two-column PDF dictionary, and if I export that as an article, as opposed to exporting the pages, then it's very easy to convert that data and import it into a term base or something, which I do all the time. If you do it with the pages, the order in which the stuff exports is kind of weird, and you can't really do anything with it. So on the whole, I find the article export more useful. The other thing that I learned recently about the article export from iceni InFix is that it handles superscripts and subscripts in text reasonably well. Now, in my scientific work, that's important. I deal with a lot of chemical formulae. I also deal with a lot of variable designations where they'll have some variable name and then subscripted certain letters. And this is very often a problem with OCR. And if I try to preserve the formatting in an OCR in order to keep the superscripts and subscripts, I have a lot of other formatting problems with the file a lot of the time. So when I found that the article export function in iceni InFix brings about 80% of the superscripts and subscripts cleanly into the exported RTF file, I was very happy about this. But 80% is not 100%, and on a recent job, I did have to invest significant time going through and correctly reformatting some of those other ones that had been missed and came out as normal text instead of superscript. Actually, it's mostly subscripted on that. So this is an area where the company could maybe, if possible, refine the functionality of the program a little bit more, make it even better. But so far, this 80% is better than I've gotten in results with most other programs. So it still saved me a lot of time, even if it wasn't perfect. Okay, now we're going to talk about the XML export and why I like that better than the XLIFF export from the online TransPDF service. One of the it doesn't need a license, first of all. Okay, the last thing I just talked about, that article export, that requires a license, which will cost you, I don't remember how much it is. It's not very much money. But this XML export can be used by anybody, regardless of whether you've got a license or not. And for me, the best thing on a number of occasions has been that it cracks protected PDFs. What does that mean? It means that it will extract the text from a PDF that has a password on it, where the client has forgotten to give me the password. This happens too often sometimes, or in an example you'll see pretty soon, sometimes you take reference documents off of the internet, like in my case from the High Patent Court in Germany, and you find that you cannot get to the text that you want in there and maybe put it into a full text database for searching or whatever because of a password on the file. And this XML export in iceni InFix ignores the password protection, which is very useful sometimes. The XML that contains the extracted content of the PDF file that you want to translate also works extremely well with the default XML filters in every CAT tool I've looked at, 3 or 4 of them so far. It's an absolute no-brainer to use it in MemoQ. I think iceni has got a pre-configured filter for MemoQ for some reason that's accessible with the little filters button in the small dialog you see here on the left. But really, you don't need it. Just use the default XML filter, and it works great. And as I'll show you later, this XML export function is extremely useful when you have graphics like organizational charts, for example, that you want to translate. Okay, and anyway, I'm showing over on the right-hand side just a screenshot of where to access that. This function has been around in InFix for quite some time. However, it has moved in different places. I think a long time ago it was maybe in version 5 or 6, it was under the document menu. Now they've got a separate translate menu. So if for some reason you have an older version of InFix, or you know somebody with an older version of InFix, they may have to look somewhere else for it. But in version 7, which is the current version, it is under the translate menu, and it is under local and export. And then when you choose that function, the little dialog that you see on the left will appear. And after you translate the file, you bring it back in via the same menu and local, and then that little function that's underneath export, import. That's all there is to it. And again, all of this can be done on a protected PDF, and it can be done whether you have a license or not. So you can create a translated PDF and send it to your client and get approval if you want to. Very, very nice. And so let's go on to the next slide here. Okay, XLIFF export. This is a very popular feature, and rightly so. It's very nice functionality that the company has introduced in the last couple of years. I don't appreciate it as much as some other people do, but that has to do with the peculiar nature of my work. No license is required to use this, and this XLIFF export function, which is actually being done through the TransPDF service of iceni, you can do it from within InFix, from the translate menu, or you can also do it in a web page. That works very well. And at least one CAT tool, MemoQ, has this service integrated in its import filter for PDF files. And I've got a view of that on the left side of this slide. You've got in MemoQ, there are 3 different converters that they use for PDF. And the default is actually to use the TransPDF service. There are some limitations using this function from MemoQ. I think if you do not have an accessible text PDF. If it's an image PDF, I don't think you're going to get any usable results from this. And also, if you try to use TransPDF and the PDF file has a password on it, you will get a result. You'll get an XLIFF back with absolutely nothing in it. It'll be an empty XLIFF and you won't be able to translate anything. What's the solution then? You go and you use the XML export function that I talked about previously. That's one of the reasons I like the XML export function. It is extremely robust. It will work when all of the other processes fail. You also can't do an article export if you have a password on the file. But the XML export always comes through. But when you can use the TransPDF XLIFF export function, it's a very nice one. I typically use it integrated in MemoQ, but again, you can do it straight off the web page. Actually, this domain, transpdf.com, it redirects to another domain. I think it's transpdf.iceni.com, but it doesn't matter. That it's easier to write that, and it will get you to the right place. And you have to have an account with TransPDF, but you can get a free account. They give you a certain amount of free credit. If you do a lot of PDF conversion there, and then you want to get nice, high-quality final PDF output for your client, you eventually have to start paying a per-page fee, or I think they also have subscriptions. But if you want to produce drafts with a little watermark on them for your client to look at and approve, you can do that at no cost whatsoever. And then you or the client can pay a very small fee to have that watermark removed from the PDF file. So, you know, I've never seen a problem with that particular function. It's a very nice thing, and it's a nice business model, the way that iceni has done this, because they give you access to the technology so you can explore its possibilities. You can show the client that you have been able to do this and make sure that the final result meets the client's expectations. And then when everything is good on all sides, you can have it produce the final print-ready PDF, if that's what your delivery goal is. Okay, so which of these three methods is best for your project? Again, that's going to depend on what the relationship is with the client, what the expectations are. One thing I should mention is, I made a note to myself here, there are special issues with text on image PDF. Now, what are those special issues? Oh, well, the special issues with the text on image PDF might be that if you're using the text on image PDF, if you're using the XML export function or the XLIFF export function, and you have a scan, text on image PDF, you're going to get all the garbage. You're going to get everything, and it may not be in the order that you expect it to be in, and it may not be usable for translation purposes. So I found that the article export works just fine on a text on image PDF. And so if I have one of those, I don't send it to TransPDF. It's a simple PDF, so with simple blocks of text would work fine that way. But I do a lot of complicated layouts, and it just wouldn't work. So the article export, again, that function that you have to have a license for, allows you to deal with the text on image PDFs very effectively. It's very, very nice. But for translation purposes, very often, as a translator, it's easier for me to deal with the more well-behaved formats of XML and XLIFF and to put those back in. And so those are usually pretty painless processes from a translation standpoint. But the disadvantage of those, of using the XML export or the XLIFF export, is, as you see in this little chart I have here on the left side of the slide, you get a PDF back. And a lot of the times clients don't want a PDF. What do? Well, sometimes if I want to be mean, I take that PDF and I throw it into ABBYY FineReader, and I do an OCR of it, tell it to save an exact copy. Those things are almost impossible to edit. They're just a nightmare, but they look like the original. And I have some clients send me that sort of a thing for a translation source document, which gives me no end of headaches. So you could do that if you were the vengeful type, but that's not very nice. A very simple method that I find usually works pretty well and doesn't require all that much cleanup to make a file that won't upset your client is just open the PDF in Microsoft Word and translate it. Oh, the other issue I didn't mention with the text on image PDFs is fine. You get your XLIFF out and you translate it, and then you get the final target PDF, and guess what it's going to be? Okay, it's going to be a PDF with images in the original, in the source language, because those are scanned pictures, and the text behind it is going to be your translated text, but nobody's going to be able to see that. It's another reason why the article export's better, or just do a standard OCR in another program like FineReader. But on the right here, you see a picture of a PDF that I opened up in Microsoft Word, and the drop cap is in a weird place, so I have to move that. But other than that, it was actually pretty good. The client would be able to edit it and do other things with it. A lot of the times, if it's going into a layout process, I try to get just simple RTF or plain flow text. But again, this is going to depend on the particular process for the particular project, and I don't believe that it's responsible to make any kind of generalizations about the best way to do anything, because every project is different. Okay, here's an example from one of those fire brochures that I keep showing here of the article export function for a flyer going to RTF, and it shows how it kind of maintains the fonts and the layout a little bit. I opened this and took a screenshot in Microsoft Word with all of the formatting characters, so the line feeds and the paragraph breaks and the spaces and all that visible, just because if there's a problem with the layout, if I have those characters turned on, I can understand. It's the only way I can understand what actually went wrong with the layout and address that. But that's pretty nice, actually. And if it's going to be relayed out or whatever, I could just take that file after I translate it and save it as plain text and apply a little bit of formatting, whatever. But you know, the other nice thing about using the article export function in iceni InFix is that exporting the parts of the PDF that you have defined as an article, or if you've done it in more than one, articles, you don't get OCR errors. One of the things that drives me absolutely bananas about ABBYY FineReader, and I don't know if this is an inherent flaw of the program or if it's just my own ignorance after more than a decade of using the product, about some magical hidden setting. They're always hiding this. Every new version, they rearrange the whole interface. It drives me crazy. And so I can't find functions that I knew before. But when I take a PDF that has accessible text and I put it into ABBYY FineReader, FineReader treats it like an image, and it does the OCR, but sometimes it reads the letters wrong. If the kerning, the spacing between letters is pretty tight, there are a lot of misinterpretations. An R followed by an I might be interpreted as an N, for example. It's really a big mess. And the nice thing about iceni InFix, especially with the article export, is it's dealing with the actual accessible text in the PDF file. So you are not creating any OCR errors. The only way you're going to get an OCR error out of iceni InFix is if you have a dead PDF, a PDF with scanned images in it, and you tell it to do OCR, and it's not a good thing, or you have the wrong recognition language set. That's that's something that I see people do a lot of the time. Project managers at agencies, for example, who don't do these processes very well or don't pay attention might do OCR on a German file with English set as the recognition language. That usually doesn't turn out very well. And if you're doing article exports, you'll at least get a correct text out of it. So maybe article exports in iceni and InFix are more idiot-proof, you might say. I suppose so. Okay, about those graphics. Yeah. iceni InFix is just, for me personally, the superstar for dealing with graphics. Okay, I don't usually do financial graphics like the one on the right-hand side. I just stole that off of one of the US government websites because it's more interesting than most of my boring scientific graphics. But if you look at this slide on that goofy arrow that's pointing up and down, you see at the top in the kind of blackish area, it says more banks something. More banks something. Yeah, kind of hard to read. And then down below in the red part, more banks tightening. So I suppose it's something opposite that, loosening or whatever. I can't see it very well on this screen. I can see it just fine when I was preparing this. But anyway, that text would be almost impossible to OCR, really. And I see a lot of graphics that have goofy colored backgrounds and not so hot contrast like you see here. OCR is basically hopeless for that. So you have to get at the accessible text in some way, assuming that there is accessible text. If this is a dead graphic, a bitmap image, then you've got a problem and you probably need to do a manual transcription, but you know, that's the breaks. But if you have accessible text like this, iceni InFix allows you to use the XML extract function to get that out and fix it. And what I often do is if there's a couple, let's say I've got a 50-page report that I'm translating and it's got 5 graphics in it, and I've got, I might even be a Word file with 5 graphics, but my cat tool doesn't extract the text in those graphics. I still want to translate it. One of the things I do is I just get rid of all the other text on the page. And if it's a PDF, I can delete the other text areas just to simplify the whole problem. And so I've just got the graphic that I want on that page. Then I do an XML export in iceni InFix. I translate it. I import that translated XML back in, and then that graphic magically has all of the text in the target language. The editing tools of iceni allow me to adjust the size of text boxes. If I'm dealing, we'll say if you're translating into Portuguese, Portuguese text tends to be a little longer than English text. No, I don't translate into Portuguese. My Portuguese sucks, but other people do. Portuguese people do. And so they may have problems with the sizing of text boxes. iceni InFix has lots of nice tools where you can move text boxes, you can make them larger, you can make them smaller. So you can do all of the little fine tuning that you might have to do to that translated graphic, and you don't have to have access to the program that created the graphic in the first place, and you don't have to involve a graphic artist most of the time. The one situation where you do run into trouble, and I run into this frequently, is if you don't have the fonts. Now, fonts are embedded in a PDF file, but if you only have a little bit of text that uses that font and you're translating it into another language, the chances are fairly high that you will have some text that uses letters that were not embedded in that PDF file. And in some cases, these are commercial fonts, so the other person can't legally just give it to you. But iceni does warn you when that kind of situation occurs. It doesn't just throw some garbage in the place where the letter isn't available. It actually suggests font substitutions. So if that particular font that you see here in this graphic is not available for all of the letters, it might say, okay, you might want to try using Arial Bold instead, or Helvetica Narrow, something else. And if you don't like the suggestion, you can choose something else. So there are ways around that particular problem. And yeah, this is another type of graphic that I do all the time by this XML export method with iceni. Organization charts. There's many, a lot of financial charts and some other things. I think on the whole, that an InFix is the best tool for dealing with that particular challenge. And like I mentioned before, somebody gives me a long Microsoft Word file that has a couple of those graphics where I can tell, yeah, I can select and copy that text, but I can't get into the graphic and change it, or it looks like complete garbage. If I do manage to get it edited, sometimes the graphics have each individual letter in a separate text box. If you open them up in the editor and that's accessible from Microsoft Word, it's impossible to translate in situ in those situations. And so what I do then is I create a, just a second, I think there's something in the chat box. Let's see what's up. Comment here, memsource, something about memsource. We'll find out what that is in the discussion. If it's a dead image, InFix can send it to your image editor. You can, yeah. I do something similar sometimes too. Yeah, I go and I erase all the text, and yeah. There's a lot of different techniques. I mean, you could do a whole workshop just on dealing with graphics. But that's the simple techniques I'm presenting here is mostly to give you an idea that it's possible. And then if you've got a situation where it doesn't fit, there's probably some tweak, and we can discuss that in the Q&A at the end, and Guy can give you more details and tips on those processes. But I guess the message to take away here is that this particular stupidity that I see from so many translation agencies in dealing with graphics of, oh, we'll just put a table and down at the bottom of the graphic. Well, I have a couple problems with that. It doesn't actually give you a usable graphic, so people have to like skip back and forth with their eyes to read the key. Or if they're going to make a graphic, some graphic artist has to do it manually, and that's very often a disaster. The graphic artists I've dealt with in many cases, regardless of their graphic skills and their good intentions, when they are copying and pasting or typing text in a language which is not their native language, or even if it is their native language, this is simply another opportunity to introduce errors. Okay, I'm not perfect. I make typos all the time, and so do graphic artists. And so you've typed it perfectly in that wonderful little text box underneath the graphic. But when it's being retyped into Photoshop or something, then errors creep in. And people might not notice those until after the publication has already been printed. And that's a very unfortunate situation. So this is all, for me, this is all about reducing risk, reducing the risk that somebody who's just, not an incompetent person, but a busy person is going to overlook some detail. And so iceni InFix facilitates the reduction of risk so that all of us can apply our skills and do the best job as possible with the fewest distractions and the fewest possibilities of something going wrong. So something else can go wrong because it's inevitable that something will. Okay, and what I was going to say is in those situations where I have that big Microsoft Word file, I will actually maybe delete all the text and then use the function in Microsoft Word to save that file as a PDF. And then I will take iceni InFix, translate those graphics, which also means that my cat tool has access to them. So I can use whatever term bases, translation memories and stuff might have relevant content for the translation of those graphics. That's very handy. It's way better than just, you can overwrite the things, just overtype a couple simple things in the editor of iceni InFix or Adobe Acrobat or many other PDF editing tools. But it's nice to be able to extract that in an XML, apply your term bases, apply your TMs. It just lets you work faster and a little more consistently. And then I usually make screenshots and then make dead graphics bitmaps out of those screenshots and embed them in the document. There may be better ways, but it's a simple way, and I've been doing that for years, and my clients have generally been very happy with that. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about PDF references. Yeah, it's nice to have PDFs so you can see the actual layout of the text that you're going to translate. And a lot of times clients forget to give you that, and I almost always beg for it because a lot of times seeing the actual text in the layout avoids making stupid mistakes. I mean, if you realize, oh, that text is actually in a picture caption or it's in a subtitle, that often calls for a completely different translation than if we're in the flow text. And sometimes in these layouts, the text that you're translating might not be in the order that you would read it in the layout. And so it's incredibly useful to have this. But again, sometimes what they give you is a dead PDF. Here you see a screenshot from a job that I do. I've got another one of those too. I do this a couple times a month, motorcycle reviews for Kawasaki. And somebody's too cheap to spend a few euros to get a good electronic PDF copy. So they always scan these magazines. As you can see from the example here, the contrast is not always very good. You've got some kind of a blurry background of somebody's garden or something behind there. I don't know what it is, with text on top of it. You try to OCR this kind of thing, it doesn't always work out very well. And again, in something like this, where you've got little boxes of texts all over the graphics and in call-out boxes all over the place, seeing where the text is in the actual layout is very often absolutely critical to understanding how you should translate it. And so again, as I mentioned earlier in the talk, iceni InFix is one of those tools that excels at taking these scanned PDFs and very easily making it into a searchable PDF. And here you can see in the screenshot, I've got the little search box in Adobe Acrobat up, and I was looking for some text, and it selected the chunk of text that had what I was looking for. So I can just go very quickly through a 10-page or 20-page article and find the reference to a particular motorcycle or some issue with the transmission or whatever, without having to flip through forever looking for that. And again, these are reference documents as opposed to documents that you're supposed to translate. You really don't want to go to the trouble of extracting them out, with OCR into a Microsoft Word file or something. Very often, you need to see the original layout. So making searchable PDFs out of dead PDFs is just a wonderful thing with iceni InFix. And for me, the process is a little bit more idiot-proof than it is in some of the other tools that I've seen. Okay, this was another example that I mentioned earlier. Years ago, I was doing annual reports for the German Federal Patent Court. And I wanted to make a corpus of the reports from all of the previous years. And once I got back to the year 2010, however, you notice this little thing says nicht barrierefrei. It basically means that all those files have passwords and you can't get into them that easily. You can't extract the text very easily at all. And of course, I don't have the password. At some point, they kind of woke up and realized that was a dumb idea, and so they started putting up PDFs without those passwords. But it is a problem. And I was using MemoQ. I wanted to create a LiveDocs corpus and then use the term mining module to get kind of a statistical overview of the frequent terminology that I would find in these reports. And I couldn't do it at first. That old version of MemoQ didn't have a PDF extraction engine that would get to the text very easily. But I found that XML export that we talked about before was the perfect way to get at that text and create my reference corpus, so I could just go through and read all the content of those old protected PDFs. It was not a problem at all. But when I opened them up in iceni InFix, I got the little warning dialog on the left as you will be unable to edit this document unless you know the password. Well, guess what? Translation is not considered to be editing. You can't change, if you don't have the password to the document, you cannot change the size or the location of text boxes in iceni InFix. You cannot overwrite any of the text manually using the editing tools in iceni InFix, but you can export XML that has all of the translatable content, and you can bring it back into the file without having the password. So essentially, you can change all the text without having the password. But if you need to make some adjustments, in the way that the text wraps in a box or something, then you got to get the password. But at least being able to do that has kept me from losing critical time on rush projects and has made me look really, really good to my clients who might take a day or two to find what beach the graphic artist disappeared to and get the password from her. Yeah, and here's an example of just some of that PDF. And this was actually the document where really the graphic artist sent it to me for translation, figuring that I was just going to type it in a Microsoft Word file and send it back. Yeah, in this totally layout heavy document. So she could then charge a bunch of money to lay it out again. And so I just exported XML, did the translation, sent it back with Arial instead of her expensive, Euro style fonts, which I didn't have. But then the next day it was very easy to fix that because everything was already in the TM. And anyway, it's just a few adjustments once the password was finally available. And this is just a wonderful feature of InFix. You know, it keeps you from grinding to a halt when some small thing like not having the password happens. Yeah, okay, the other thing that InFix is really, really good for is last minute changes to PDF files that are supposed to go to print, but somebody overlooked something. And here you see an example of that on the right-hand side of the slide. I put red boxes around two parts that somebody forgot to translate. I don't know what the problem was. I was given an INDD, an InDesign file for this, and that content did not show up for some reason. So I don't know if this was a graphic, and this is all a graphic header, or what the problem was. No, actually it's editable. It's editable in the PDF, as I discovered because I used InFix to fix it. I simply went in, used the editor, selected the content of those text boxes, and then just typed the translation in there because this PDF did not have a password. But you could also, again, export an XML or get access to it in some other way if you needed to. But for last minute touch up of flyers, graphics heavy things, where if the graphic artist goes in again and starts mucking around a lot, there's probably going to be yet another error introduced. InFix is just great. It can save your bacon, you know, when it's 20 minutes to go to press. Okay, yeah, this is the example of the file for which I did not have the password. As you can see, the presentation, the demonstration of these new firefighting tanks for dealing with horrible forest fires in Portugal or Indonesia or whatever is coming up in just 2 days. And yeah, we were a bit stressed because we didn't have the password and this file had to be done. As you can see, there's a bit of layout to it. And InFix saved the day. Okay, this was actually done the next day after I got the password, but everything was actually perfect except that the word exercise wrapped onto the next line. So I got the password, and then there was one little bit of touch up, and then we were done, and it could go to print. Okay, some other things to talk about here at the end real quick. Just a few other neat aspects of iceni InFix for translation is it's got a word count function for PDFs. So you don't need to do an OCR to get a quick word count. You just select that function. I think it's under the document menu, and it goes through and shows you a little progress bar as it goes through the whole document and counts everything. This was a 190-page report file. This was the protected PDF, one of the protected PDFs from the German Federal Patent Court. I was just curious how many words were in there. Almost 80,000, 79,224 words. And it counted all of that in, I don't know, I don't remember, a minute, something like that. It takes longer than that to do an OCR of 190 pages. Years ago, one of my agency clients actually went out and bought ABBYY FineReader just to do word counts. Okay, this is faster. This is probably better because if it's a file with accessible text, you're actually getting a count of the actual words as opposed to whatever OCR garbage might have been created with tags and all sorts of stuff that doesn't necessarily accurately reflect the real word count. So another really nice little feature of this wonderful little program. And last but not least, since we are involved in the translation sector, things like interface languages may matter because not all of us are native English speakers. And iceni InFix has user interfaces for working in quite a number of languages. I couldn't actually find a list of those languages on their website. The website just, and when I went into the settings, you know, where that red arrow is, that's settings. I've got a screenshot of the German interface here. By default, it seems to install only one language. And the instructions that I read said, oh, if you want a different language, just reinstall it. So I ran the install routine again, and German installed just fine, and that was great. And then I went to install Russian, and it wiped out the German, so then I had English and Russian. And then I went to install Portuguese, and they have Portuguese Brazil, Portuguese from Portugal, and all that did was like blow away everything except English. So maybe that means they don't have a version 7 of Portuguese. I have no idea. I couldn't get it to work. These user interface languages, I think that needs a little bit of work with this program. And that's separate from the languages for spell checking, OCR, for example. Here, the program handles, I think, at least 15 languages. That has nothing to do with the user interface language. But this is an area where I find the program a little bit confusing, and I think there probably could be some development work to make it easier. And what's also very important is people always ask me, oh, does this program run on a Mac? Does it work under Linux? Or what? Well, iceni InFix works in Windows, which is what I use it in. There's also a Linux version available for those of you who like Linux, use Omega T or whatever. And it also runs on Macintosh. So you've got your choice of options, and that's kind of nice. So as I say, it's a very, very versatile program, and you're not going to be restricted by the operating system that you use. You know, if you're talking about cat tools, with a lot of the major cat tools like STL Trados or MemoQ, if you want to use it on something other than Windows, you've got to start doing some weird virtualization workarounds or whatever. None of that nonsense with iceni InFix. It will work in the operating system of your choice. Whether it will offer you a user interface language of your choice, maybe. Take it up with the company. As I say, that's a little bit complicated. Okay, and now we've kind of gotten to the end of the prepared presentation. We've got some time for questions and answers. So if you've got a question about some of the stuff that's been presented, ask, or if you have some other things that you'd like to be able to do, again, ask. As I say, I think we've got somebody from iceni in the group today, so that person can probably tell you a lot more than I will ever know about this product. And I'm going to unplug my studio mic now so that I'm back on the less reliable internal mic on the laptop, but then I'll also be able to hear the audio coming in the other direction. And we can make this a dialogue instead of yet another monologue from me. So I'm going to unplug now. It's coming and telling me that it's switching over. And I believe that now we should be, yeah, okay, we should be accurate. So feel free to unmute your microphones and ask whatever questions you like, and Guy or anybody else can respond to it. This is just an open discussion for everybody now for any questions that you may have. Can you hear me? Can I hear you? Somebody unmute the mic just to make sure that this phone, if you don't have questions, that's okay. I just want to make sure that the audio functions are in fact working correctly, because Zoom is a wonderful platform for doing presentation. I find it generally far more reliable than TeamViewer, which is what I've used for years. but there are so many options in the interface that occasionally I don't have the settings optimized quite as well as I think I do.
Hello, Kevin. Can you hear me?
Ah, okay. I can hear voice, so it's working in the other direction. Yes. Hi, Guy.
Hi.
So, okay. Anybody have questions? I believe Guy is with iceni, so if you have questions related, Guy, can you tell us which user interface languages are available and why did my German disappear when I tried to install Portuguese, or why did my Russian disappear when I installed German?
For version 6 and before, we had quite a few languages for the user interface. For version 7, we've only got French, Russian, and German currently. I think in the next few months, quite a few more are going to be added.
But why was I not able to get both Russian and German installed, along with the English? It seemed to be English and just one other, rather than English, German, and Russian, which is a trio that I often like to have configured.
Right. You know, we actually designed it so it'd be English and one other language. We didn't assume that anyone would want multiple languages.
Oh, well, there are some people who have to go, I know some trainers in Central Europe that go around and teach to people of a lot of different linguistic backgrounds. And some of them are very versatile linguistically. So I could see some of them maybe switching between 3 or 4 different languages just as part of it. Although it's not really a big deal to install the second language. It takes just a few minutes. But not knowing that you'd done it for English and one other, I was extremely puzzled when an already installed language disappeared.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that'll be good when do you expect the other languages, the other localization should be available?
I would have thought that's going to be around the autumn.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that very well. The audio.
Around autumn.
Okay. Oh, great. So does anybody have further questions?
Yeah, this is Sven Steuer. I have a question.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
In the beginning, you said that your clients often want to have another file format instead of PDF back when it's translated.
Typically Microsoft Word, yeah, or RTF, something that they can deal with in a word processor, or something where the flow text can be thrown into InFix, for example, not InFix, InDesign, for example. It depends on the client and the job.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Most of them would actually get angry if I sent them a PDF.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to understand, because for that PDF, the use case is clear to me. You don't have a source file, you only have the .dat PDF. But often I think that a PDF file is only a print version of a real source file that exists.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to gather more information about the use case. How do they get their translated PDF files back into their original file format, etc.? So,
well, the examples that I was showing of those brochures for the firefighting demonstration that's coming up in Germany, or the general flyer that talks about the technology where they retrofit military tanks or military boats with high pressure fogging equipment to put out fires. Those things, the scenario there was they were a couple days before they had to go to print. They had a PDF from the graphic artist, and then they said, "Oh my God, we need this in English, or we need this in Portuguese." And then they sent out the PDF, because, as you know, most clients don't really understand. You know, they don't know our processes, and they don't realize that there are better ways than sending out the PDF. And I actually got 4 different files like that. I think, no, I'm sorry, 3 files for this particular client on very short deadline. And in all of those cases, I was given a PDF first. And in each case, I had to go into the properties of the PDF file, opened it up in Acrobat, and I went down in the properties and I looked. And in the properties dialog, it tells you what program created it. If it was created in Word, it says it was Microsoft Word. In this case, these were all done in InDesign. So I went back to my client and I said, listen, in order to save yourself time, because you don't have much of it, and to save yourself money, you've got lots of that, but why waste it? Go talk to your graphic artist and get the InDesign file. It will have the extension INDD or IDML. I don't care which. Just get me one of those. And if I translate that, it will be more accurate. Your graphic artist will be able to produce a print-ready file with less work on her part and less chance that she will accidentally introduce errors trying to reflow my copy. Or they always get things wrong, like they use the hyphenation in the language. There's always some kind of a disaster with that. But anyway, so it took them actually 2 days to get hold of the graphic artist and get me the IDML file, which was ultimately what went to press for one of those jobs. But in the meantime, I was able to use these various features from iceni InFix to get the text out, do a clean translation that was better than an OCR, so that when I got the IDML, I got incredible leverage out of my TM because it was mostly pretty clean. And so there was very little work involved in creating a final translation in a better format. But sometimes you don't even have that. And in the case of something like a very graphics heavy layout for a rock concert or something like that, a poster, it's really actually better most of the time to directly translate PDF and send it back. But for, say, a typical research report or a report from a chemical analysis lab or a motion that's been filed with a court, which is the kind of stuff I see every day, if I translate that and send them back a PDF, they're not going to be very happy. Then I want to send them usually a Microsoft Word file. Very rarely any kind of a PDF. Did that answer your question, or?
Yes, absolutely. So thank you very much. This was really helpful. And
but you know, there are other translators. Like there's a Brazilian engineer that has been one of my mentors for iceni and a whole lot of other things going back, I think 18 years now, as long as I've been involved in commercial translation. He was always one of the people I thought had some of the most interesting and useful advice on translation technology. And he was one of the early adopters of iceni InFix. I heard about it first from him. Apparently, a very large part of his translation business involves print-ready PDFs or graphics-heavy PDFs. And so he actually has even more reason to use InFix day in, day out than I do. And you can see all the useful things that InFix will do just for routine stuff that all of us do. So again, it depends. All of us have a different business and different clients. And you may think, oh, it's not relevant to me. And then tomorrow your client's going to send you some crazy brochure that they need to have turned around right away, and they can't find the graphic artist. They can't get the original InDesign file, or even if they can, they're not sure that the artist is going to give them back the PDF fast. I've actually been waiting for a week now to get one of the translations I did back in the form of a final PDF, and the graphic artist just hasn't done it yet. But I needed a PDF, so I used the XML function and I created a PDF. It didn't have a password, fortunately, so I could make the little adjustments I had, share it with somebody else that really needed that information. I say, for whatever kinds of crazy PDF challenges that come up, iceni InFix is honestly one of the best and most versatile tools I've seen. And everybody I've recommended it to, when they've started to use it and they realize all the things they can do with it, they're very happy. Why shouldn't they be? Anyway, any more questions? Okay. Well,
Can you hear me?
Yes, Dave.
Okay, if I'm clear. Well, what I'd like to say is the reason when you get a PDF, if you try to convert it into a doc with ABBYY or a solid converter, in order to reproduce the layout, it tends to have a lot of formatting, a lot of strange spacing, anchored images, and that doc becomes very difficult to handle.
Or impossible.
Especially if the translation is a bit longer. So you've got all these text flow problems. And what I discovered with InFix about 2 years ago is because it extracts the text and then you translate it and it inserts the text back into the original PDF, you escape having to deal with these terrible Word documents. Although I understand that not everybody agrees with me. And some people who are very good with Word prefer to use that method. But I like to go from PDF back into PDF.
Well, you know what you could also do, Dave? Do exactly that. Go back into PDF. The layout looks okay. And if they want a Word file for some reason, use the article export feature of iceni InFix. Questions, or Dave, you were telling us about your article export or flow issues. I think you were interrupted for the recording, so if you have anything further to add, please do. Just unmute yourself and go for it.
No, that was it.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you beautifully now.
Yeah,
Again, I apologize for the
just to
technical
say
problems.
that I use the XLIFF filter much more than you. I'm going to look at your workflows later, and it was simply to avoid dealing with these Word documents which had terrible workflow.
Yeah, Paul Filkin of SDL absolutely loves the TransPDF. In fact, he was the first one I heard about it from before it was even officially released. And he did some comparative testing between the XML export and the XLIFF in its early stages. And when Paul tells me that the XLIFF was actually a little more accurate or better segmented or whatever it was he said at the time, I believe him because he's a very thorough individual in looking at
this. There's less tags. I think that's the main thing. But Guy might be able to
less tags. Hey, that's something that a lot of translators.
Yeah.
You know, but one thing about the TransPDF thing is, I was in a discussion. I don't remember which conference it was, but one of the translators who was in that discussion started to have a big fit. We were talking about MemoQ, and somebody said, "Oh, I really like this new integrated feature in MemoQ, this TransPDF, and so forth." And I say, "Yeah, it's nice." And then one person who was in the discussion started having fits about it, saying, "Oh, this is just terrible what they've done because this violates confidentiality for my clients," and so on. And anyway, so they ranted for a little while, and I said, "Well, you know, there is another option." No, it's terrible. It goes online and I'm not allowed to do this because of the NDAs. I've said, well, there's the local XML export that covers. If you're really concerned about that and it really is an issue, then just use the XML export. Well, you'll just have to deal with some extra tags maybe. But as I say, for a lot of things, especially when I'm dealing with a protected PDF, XML is the only option. The other ones just don't work.
I think they've also got a server, actually. But I see that Guy, unfortunately, has gone offline. He got cut. He can't get back.
He probably thought we were
for agencies, they do have a server solution.
I saw that on the website. I don't know anything about it. But yeah, it would be interesting to find out about that, just to be able to share the information with my agency consultant clients. But you know, even with just the existing functionality that you see here in InFix, it has been quite a blessing to a number of agencies that I work with. I've shared this with the operations managers and others that I know at various companies, and they've been able to get a lot of mileage out of this tool. I mean, and when you consider how much you can do with it without even having a license, it's extremely translator friendly, and the fees for converting to give you a PDF without the watermarks or whatever are really quite reasonable.
Well, I'm biased. Just to be honest, I work with them. I don't work for them, and I'm not paid. But just to tell the others, I discovered the tool about 2 or 3 years ago, and like you, it saved my life a couple of times.
Oh yeah.
So I started to give them some advice and some help.
Yeah, well, it's like what I do with Kilgray. Some people have the mistaken idea that I'm a Kilgray employee. Believe me, if I were, I wouldn't be allowed to say some of the things I say when I'm annoyed about bugs or other things. No, it's just like InFix. It's one of those tools that is absolutely indispensable to my work and my desire to work efficiently. And when it falls short in some aspect, if they've got a good development team, they listen. So I give them advice on how they can serve me or my colleagues better. And I'm really glad when people like you do that with other providers of good tools, because really, they're not mind readers, and they don't know our work until we tell them what it is. And they've done so many things right over the years with iceni. I can't remember what the first version was I looked at. 3 or 4 or something like that. It's been a long time. You can see on my blog when I first started working with it, and they just keep getting better and better. I like it when I see that kind of a thing in a technology provider for my work. So anybody else have further questions, comments, wishes? Okay, if not, yes?
Yes, could you please mention your the link to your blog again?
Oh, yeah, I even have that on a slide, sort of. Just a minute.
Yes, I didn't see it.
Oh, actually, yeah, it's here, but I'll show you. Yeah, translationtribulationsallwrittentogether.com, and I think since I've got, just a minute.
Thank you.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, yeah, it's got a lot of information on a lot of different technology. So you'll find a lot of stuff from 10 years ago that maybe isn't all that current, but I leave it on the blog because there are an awful lot of people who use very old versions of software sometimes. If you don't need it every day and you don't have very complicated needs, there's really no reason to upgrade in many cases. So you'll find stuff for ancient versions of iceni InFix or for versions of MemoQ that have just faded from almost everybody's memory, because there are people still out there using MemoQ 3-point-something, 4-point-something from a long time ago. Now, or old. I mean, there's still Trados Workbench users out there, believe it or not. Okay, and so I think it's important to have information available for people regardless of what version of tools they're using. Just sometimes you have to be careful when you look up information in sources like my blog that it is actually talking about a current version or a version that is actually relevant to you. Something in the chat window here. Need to leave. Okay. Well, goodbye, Sven. Thank you for joining us. Okay, if nobody else has other questions, we are more or less at the end of the allocated time. Again, I apologize for the technical problems. Next time I do this, I will take my extra UPS and put it on the internet router. So when the maid blows out the breakers, it doesn't blow out the meeting. Thank you very much, everybody, for your attention and for your feedback. And watch the blog. I've got a couple of other things planned. I just have to decide exactly when I'm going to schedule them. And if you've got suggestions for some area you'd like to discuss, contact me privately by whatever channel is convenient, and we'll see if we can arrange a time for that. All of you, I wish you a very good day and a pleasant summer, and happy translating. Goodbye.